Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ancestral Eyes. We have a special guest. Oh, yeah, play the music. That's the Dragon Ritual Drummers. And we've got Utu Withdoctor tonight. I swear, your music, Utu, always makes me want to dance. Okay, so before we start getting the music,
we have to be careful that Teresa doesn't
going, and I'm going to sing.
We have to be careful. I am not going over there to pull you up from the wall.
Yeah, no kidding. Pull me off the wall. Pull me off the ceiling.
Aburua boy, everybody. Welcome again to our second episode of Ancestral Eyes. We're very privileged and very happy to have an old friend, Utu Withdoctor, with us this evening. And we have a very exciting and very interesting show tonight. And with my co-host, Teresa Slewinski, here at Ancestral Eyes. Teresa, do you want to do a little bit of an intro or welcome to Utu?
Yes, welcome, Utu. Okay, so I've got some questions, and I'm sure Jean-Jerome does too. But first of all, I'm sure you're probably sick and tired of people asking about your book, but we want to ask. Okay, so I do have your book. Thank you very much. It's actually a signed copy. A good friend of mine went and picked it up. And it's called Conjuring Harriet, Mama Moses Tubman. Okay. Now, you're okay with me quoting some of the other authors, right, Utu? Because I was just reading parts of this book, okay, and I can't wait to just dive into the whole thing. I just sort of read bits and parts over the last couple of days. But anyway, I love some of the praises, some of the excerpts, and some of the quotes from some of the other authors. Again, in the community, there's a nice quote here by Ivo Dominguez Jr. This is what he has to say about your book. This book offers a working system that blends and acknowledges the Christian, African, and folk magic traditions that are the natural home for those called to work with Mama Moses. She does not rest in peace. She rises in power. I love that. I think that's an awesome quote. Then there's another one here, and this one's by Reverend Timothy Shaw, a spiritualist minister, and this is what he had to say. Conjuring Harriet Mama Moses Tubman and the Spirits of the Underground Railroad is a practical manual of instructions giving both the adept and novice fresh knowledge to add to the ever-growing need for conjure in today's world. This is a text that should grace every metaphysical worker's bookshelf. Love that one too. And then, of course, one by Denise Alvarado, who praises you, Withdoctor Utu, shares the rarely told stories of those who follow the North Star to freedom from the antebellum South to St. Catharines, Ontario in Canada, protective roots in hand. He brings to light a powerful conjure tradition that, with a cairn and cross, guides the spiritual seeker towards a meaningful way to honor Mama Moses and the spirits of the Underground Railroad and revere the bones of those still lying in unmarked graves. I love that. I just love that. Okay. And your own dedication, if you don't mind, before we get started here. I love what you had to say as far as the dedication was concerned. Dedicated to you, spirits of the Underground Railroad, whose names have been forgotten. Your places of rest lost to time. May the work within these pages help bring many more friends to envelop you in love and illumination, sustenance and elevation. As you instructed, this work is for you. May your light shine on. So let's take it from there. Utu, what can you tell us? I mean, these are wonderful, wonderful quotes, and I love your dedication in the book. And so what I wanted to say, how did it all begin for you with regards to the spirits of the Underground Railroad?
Well, thank you so much. I'll answer that. And just wanted to say, Alafia, Teresa, blessed be as well, since we share that. And to Baba Boroboya Bochiche, thank you so much for having me on here. It's a big pleasure. And I appreciate you sharing those quotes. Well, how did it all begin for me? That's, for this book in particular, it was because of my immersion in witchcraft since the 90s. You know, I was lucky. I was raised very eclectic, born in Scotland to a non-traditional family, meaning they didn't really follow religion very much. So my mother was definitely a free-thinking, free spirit. So I traveled around with her a lot as a kid and saw a lot of different cultures. You know, we spent time in South America and all over the United States. So, you know, I was already equipped to not be really pinned down to any one religion.
Eyes were open.
Witchcraft was very much, you know, very natural blend for me. And luckily and I grew up as a drummer. You know, my father was a drummer in Scottish music, traditional Scottish music. So I was raised, you know, with rhythm and learning to drum. So I was always drumming. I played a lot of instruments, but I always had the drum in the background. And my witchcraft tradition, the Sumerian tradition, had an emphasis on the drum. So I really honed it a lot. And by the time I literally stumbled into, you know, African traditional religions, was because pre-internet, I mean, the internet existed, but nobody I knew was using it. And certainly none of the people that were trying to find drummers were at the time. So I just ended up,
I totally get that.
You know, the drum just brought me into places, and I, you know, started to dedicate my life to joyful service as a drummer for those who needed it in the traditions.
Nice.
So while living here in St. Catharines, I grew up in Toronto, but I lived here in St. Catharines since, you know, a long time, like probably almost 30 years now, most of my adult life. And, you know, I've always lived within just a few blocks of the church, the BME church that is the epicenter of the end of the Underground Railroad in regards to Harriet Tubman's track. So there was many routes and many crossing points, but the two most prominent crossing points were the one that crossed from Detroit into Windsor, and the one that crossed over from whether it was Buffalo, Niagara Falls, or Lewiston, New York, into the Niagara region, and ending here in St. Catharines. And when I eventually met up and decided I also wanted to serve the New Orleans Voodoo Spiritual Temple run by Priestess Miriam Chimani, I wanted to spend more time and learn more. And I was younger and, you know, just full of all the exuberance. And it was members of the temple and them that said, you know, well, while you're not coming down here to learn with us or serve or help, you know, focus on the voodoo of Niagara. And
spirits of the land.
And I said, well, yeah, what voodoo in Niagara? You know, to be honest, I never thought about it. And lo and behold, I walked around the corner and started to think about it. And you know, the church used to have a plot of land behind it that used to be a cemetery. The whole street used to be where everybody there were freedom seekers lived and built their neighborhood and their little. That's Canaan, and the spirituals, that was Canaan. Wow. That was the promised land. Although it's very decrepit now, unfortunately. Yeah. And I realized that, you know, there was still actually bodies buried in a few of those empty lots. The reason that happened is because, you know, when St. Catharines, all the churches used to have their people buried in the behind the church. And when the city grew and built their big cemetery, they went around to all the churches and said, exhume your people and bring them to the new cemetery. And so the churches or the denominations that had a good sexton were able to do that a lot better than the ones that didn't. And unfortunately, the two churches of the Underground Railroad, which would be the British Methodist Episcopal Church, which is the Salem Chapel, and just down the road, the Zion Baptist Church, which was also built by freedom seekers. Both these churches were built by freedom seekers. They didn't have a sexton quite the same way. So there are some people were left behind. And we knew that. I knew that from some residents. I lived in the neighborhood and I still do. And I know that where some of them are. So immediately it began to be working with them, giving them remembrance, because these were brave souls to me, people that fought for their freedom, you know, escaped slavery, spent you know, some of the hardest conditions to make it to freedom, only to come to St. Catharines and then work really hard again and then pass away and then not even have a grave marker. And to me, that seemed tragic. And it seemed like, and the first challenge put forth to me from the spirits was to create the symbology of the cairn and the cross, which is the marker of a simple cross and a cairn, which was traditional, which is why some of those graves were never able to be found, because people couldn't afford headstones, you know, so the graves were rocks with a cross or broken pottery or things, you know, set around their people. So it became that. And the more I work with those spirits, the more the elevation, the illumination and the interplay and the communication began. And, you know, that's what led me to revering and exalting Harriet Tubman as a folk saint in a way, I suppose. She's a holy light. Discovered that, you know, I'm lucky. The Dragon Ritual Drummers that I belong to, we travel a lot. So it's spent a lot of time traveling around parts of the Underground Railroad in the States. My own little personal trips became something of an obsession. And it just became this, following spirit, following the guide in the hands of those who were wanting their stories to be told, wanting their stories to be remembered. And it just became that. It became that obsession, that mission that still continues to this day. And unfortunately, the sad thing is that plot of land behind the BME church, which sat vacant for decades, is now, you know, they're building the new police station on it. And, you know, there was a lot of, I don't mind saying it, there's a lot of shady things that happened with the way they were trying to do the archaeological dig to find it. Everybody knows they didn't do it right, or that it was a very sordid situation. And I did everything I could to bring attention to it.
To save it.
But yeah, you know, so there's still some people buried in another part of that neighborhood as well still. And so I still go there, give them offerings, give them song, give them remembrance, and help to commemorate to me people that are heroes of self-emancipation, in the likes of which is hard to fathom for most people, I think, of what had to be endured in order to reach your freedom. To me, that's inspiration. And it also revealed to me as well that, you know, the New Orleans Voodoo Spiritual Temple, what I loved about serving it is it's a very universal approach, you know. So there's it's in New Orleans, but if Priestess Miriam had to move to any other place, like, you know, Nashville or Miami, it would be called the Miami Voodoo Spiritual Temple, the Nashville Spiritual Temple, because it's about her spiritual legacy, her spiritual work. And so it's very universal. As a pagan at the time, early on, you know, I was one of those pagans and witches that was programmed to be, you know, hating everything that was Catholic or Christian. And to be honest, the amount of Christianity that I realized was involved in root work and conjure, and to an extent, North American voodoo, it was a challenge. It was a challenge to me, but I'm so grateful that it was. I
totally get that.
It helped me become more accepting, understand the nuance that's buried beneath some of the reasons why the Bible was used by freedom seekers and how their culture clinged. So it's very unique. But for me too, the unique thing about the whole mission of the Underground Railroad as a spiritual metaphor and a tradition is that it encompassed Black, white, women, men, Christian, Jew, Catholic, Native American, Canadian American. These were all free thinkers, even atheists, that all somehow managed to work together for true progressive values, true progressive mission, to help people get away from bondage and into a place where they could be free human beings. To me, that was the idea, the framework of teamwork, humans working together, no matter how different, you know, some of them were, they all had the same mission and the same cause. And that seemed to me like a really good place to put a root that was given to me and let a tree grow to bear fruit that can help maybe nourish others, to serve these spirits, remember them, and remember some of these exalted heroes that fought for the Underground Railroad, the ones that are famous, as inspiration. And so in a way, it became its own African traditional based American conjure tradition. So and so that's how that all started, is because of my proximity of being right beside the area. I've gotten to know a lot of the descendants over the years. Like I said, it was an obsession, a mission to you know, be friends, become family, even have relationships with some of them. And, you know, and that's been what it's been all about for me. While I'm serving whatever else I've done, it was all just about making that mission happen, to elevate the Underground Railroad, and to also, what history doesn't like to talk about is how much root work, conjure, and voodoo was a part of the Underground Railroad. So yes, spirituals were sung. Yes, many freedom seekers and people that escape bondage were, you know, Christians. But the African experience that, again,
The
as a Scottish
ancestors.
person raised in Canada, immersed in American mythology that connects through the Underground Railroad to here, I'm kind of like still like an explorer. And so to me, it's interesting. And that history doesn't like to reveal that how much one of the main spiritual arms of the Underground Railroad was root work and conjure. So I come to find out as years went by that Black historians and Black writers and anthropologists and people that became friends of mine and colleagues,
they don't want to admit it.
They can't get a book published because of it. So, I'm not a historian, but because I was fortunate that Weiser offered me to write the book, I at least used the occult publisher to, illuminate the idea and the aspect of how much the African religion was a part of the Underground Railroad, which is something mainstream history and does not like to talk about. So it's a multifaceted mission. It's been gratifying. It's been challenging. It's been a lot of things, but I've been enriched for it. My house is dedicated to all those spirits where I live. The Niagara Voodoo Shrine is a little cottage, and it's just from back door to front door. It's shrines, of course, to some of the Orisha, but also to the spirits of the Underground Railroad.
Ashe, ashe. I think that's amazing. And you know what really impressed me about your book? I was saying to Jean Jerome, I go, look at the bibliography. I go, he's got like 5 pages. Okay. What impressed me about your book was the fact that you did all of this research. Other than, besides the fact that you're obviously an intuitive and you could pick up on those spirits. I mean, good for you. God bless that you were able to go into these places and sense them and see that they were there and give honor to them. I think that was amazing. But the fact that you took that challenge upon yourself and you wrote this book, but I mean, the research and like you said, the historical, like honest to God, like I'm reading this and then making connections with the families that are still living. This is a great book. It truly is, because it's more than just a manual. Like, to me, this is like a little piece of history, and I love it because the way you spun it into that conjure and the root work that was involved in this. And this is what historians don't want to talk about, because it seems like they're so busy connecting the dots of where the Underground Railroad started, where it went, what happened, blah, 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 without giving any acknowledgement to the fact that these are ancestors who brought forth with them spiritual belief systems, okay, and integrated them in with Christianity in order to be accepted. And they moved forward with this. So, I give you, kudos to you for being able to do that, because it is an amazing book. It truly is. I was impressed with that altogether. Now, so I'm going to ask you the question in regards to the controversy. Okay.
Okay.
I know. Oh no, here we go again, right? But the thing is that people didn't, I think they were just so preoccupied with the fact that here you are, you're this white guy from Canada, and you're going to start talking about, Black ancestors. Okay. And like, so who are you? And one of the foreword actually written by Baba Ted Jiao, I was very impressed with what he had said. And if I can interpret what he was saying, is it goes beyond color. Okay, this is actually a work of the spirits coming through you. Okay, and these people that criticized you didn't understand the whole idea behind the thing, that it doesn't matter what your color is. When the spirits work with you and when spirit works with you, they don't look at your color. Okay. And if they only gave you a chance to, read your book, and I'm sure they did, because all of a sudden everything kind of quieted down. Right. So, anyway, what can you share on that controversy? I mean, it was a bit silly,
Yeah, it was quite a situation. What it was really, it was all centered out of one conference out in California. And, first of all, I absolutely support and try to do my best over all of this 20 years that I've been immersed in these traditions to help eradicate or point out who the appropriators are. I understand that I'm lucky that I've become enriched in life to be immersed in the type of religions that I am and to have experienced the mysteries that I have. So I am on that side of, be careful who is writing certain things and who's teaching them. I certainly make a lot of judgments of people that I come across. I'm hardly the very first white person to ever write a book about conjure and root work, that's for sure. Some of the people that were slinging the arrows were white people that have written books on conjure and hoodoo. So what it really came down to was they didn't realize yet that this was actually a very pro-black book. I was using my ability, my lucky ability to have some privilege, and my stature, which is maybe, I don't know, like a B- in the occult celebrity level, so I was able to, and that's because of the band, the Dragon Ritual Drummers, so I was able to use that. And many people that helped write that book were descendants of freedom seekers. They were behind me all the way. Some great educators, some great historians that are, some of them are very well known, that are Black, Canadian and American, totally were like saying, hey, have you put this in that book? Because I can never get this information. Put that in there. And I was helped a lot. I was helped in a great deal. So I'm aware that the whole thing that came out of California, and it was at the time, it was the largest, most influential pagan conference. It was called Pantheacon.
Yes. Yes.
And I was invited to it. I was going to be one of the main presenters at it, and I was accepted in there. And it wasn't until some people made some noise about it that they, deplatformed me. So there I was now, a new initiation, somebody who's been fighting and advocating for 20 years. If anybody had an issue with me in the African traditional religious circle, and I mean, there's maybe some personal issues, but nobody had ever called me out on what my position was, my stature, my lineage, because as you all know, it doesn't take very long for a phone call or a couple of messages to find out we still have a good 6 degrees of separation. Even if we don't like certain people, we know they're legitimate. So for 20 years, there was never an issue until this conference. And there was multiple people that had different agendas for it. It just happened to be the enclave of the woke, rebel without a clue type of, like, just wanting to stand for something, and they just didn't realize that they just picked the wrong. Now that conference lasted 27 years. It didn't survive. It didn't survive the controversy in itself. It's done. It's finished.
It's gone.
And,
I know.
So say la vie.
Spirits work in a very interesting way, don't they? In mysterious ways.
And I do agree. There are people that write and teach books and lessons of an African traditional religious framework that are not of any of those cultures, that I think that sometimes are sharing really dangerous or just insulting information, and even the people that are really immersed in root work and conjure in the United States, it seems to me so much of it is based on curses and hexes and nefarious works, when really I wanted to, and so I didn't even write a book about traditional conjure and root work. My book is so far from the norm. It's a completely brand new concept. So yeah, once my adversaries out there got a hold of the book, because the controversy and my public cancellation from that was 3 months before the book's release. And so by the time it got out, I guess people realized, oh, okay. And then, enough people started to let folks know, we know who this person is. He's been doing this for a very long time. He was made by this person and that person. He's represented this, fundraised for them. So eventually they just all walked away and it just all became quiet. But, it was a baptism by fire. That's for sure.
Good way to describe it. No, for sure. I was just going to ask you also, because I'm glad you brought that up with regards to the conjure. Okay. Because like you said, there's, it's almost like the exposure of conjure and root work in America has a lot to do with hexing and getting back at someone, etc. Your work is very different. It's all about uplifting and honoring the ancestors, which that's what I found about all the actual manual, how to. That's what made it different. Okay. And I wanted to say, how would you describe your conjure? And I think Jean Jerome had wanted to talk about that a little bit more. Go ahead.
So I think in light of that question, Utu, I think for those joining us that come from very different backgrounds, and could be from Ifa, from Orisha, could be from Christian or other religious belief systems or spiritual belief systems or spiritists even. I think I'd like to take a few moments to define certain terms. So when we say root work, what do you define as root work, and how does that fit within your practice of either voodoo or other spiritual practice that you do, like the conjure and so forth? Like what is that definition of root work in your mind?
Well,
and conjure.
Yeah, so I could probably give a few explanations of that, and there'd be a lot of people that would maybe disagree, but I think it's safe to say that, America, other than Louisiana and to a lesser degree, Mississippi, Florida, and Georgia, which was the places there was Catholics, Carolina as well. So, the idea of an organized religion being clung to, like it happened in South America and the Caribbean, wasn't really possible in America, because if it wasn't in the Catholic zones, the Protestants were much crueler. They were much crueler slavers. They eradicated the ability for people to gather, drum, dance. So the religion itself that was still being clung to by people, again, you got to remember, like the whole root work and conjure and hoodoo and all the different terminologies for it is literally the fragments of African traditional practices and ancestral veneration trying to be clung to, saved, and preserved by people who were forced to live amongst each other as slaves from different regions, so they couldn't share their saying language. They couldn't speak their common language. They did this on purpose. The slavers, they had a modus operandi: separate people from different regions so they can't talk to each other because they all spoke different languages. So root work and conjure was the idea, more so, I guess I would describe it as, it's the medicine. It's the medicine and the plant herbology, but still with the animistic, or maybe to say shamanistic approach of the life force within the plants, within roots, within incantation. It's something that's done by one individual as a healer, as a worker, as opposed to having a battery of drummers around them, dancers, and people to facilitate spirit arriving. Then this is now an individual doing it by holding your packet, your mojo, the juju you're going to carry, that also has now, it has been blessed, it has been awoken, and spirit can walk through that. But so root work and conjure is the fragmentations of the ways that the Protestant America forced the African to have to try to find ways to cling to their traditional ways of medicine and religion. So, people that practice, the Ifa that will be in Cuba, or the Vodou in Haiti, or the Kumbanda down in Brazil, what I just realized about the Underground Railroad was that it enabled America, and America meaning Canada as well, to show that there was actually the same framework of spirits who were diviners, a spiritual family who were healers, a spiritual family who were warriors, a spiritual family who was navigators. And this is how this is done. So to just assemble them all these individuals who were, for the most part, English speaking, the tradition is still there, whether it's very similar to La Madama from Espiritismo, right? Or the Preteveos in Brazil, like these types of spirits existed here and exist here in the Americas. And they existed because the Underground Railroad was a living, breathing tradition of fraternity and exchange of religion and commonality to fight against the oppressor in order to get to your emancipation. So it just was lucky that there was Canada to the north that people could flee to. And so to me, it's all about that. It's that. So root work and conjure, and then, American voodoo. And to a degree, one of the people you read the excerpt from in the book, Denise Alvarado, she wrote a great book called Hoodoo Voodoo by the same publisher as mine. And she describes it great, because in New Orleans, you can go to certain neighborhoods in New Orleans and they'll call it voodoo, and another neighborhood will refer to it as hoodoo and conjure. People said it differently in Texas. They said it different in Mississippi. They said it different in Chicago. And all these things changed too. So root work and hoodoo and conjure, these terms came out at different times. And it's also because people mostly were clinging to it in the South. But then once, the Great Migration started to head north into St. Louis and into Chicago and Cleveland and Buffalo and Detroit, this is when you know, it now was different, and it became now, you know, honed in with more, you know, different elements of now, you know, Catholicism, Judaism, the Psalms, things of this nature. So it's still
Native American
spiritualism.
spiritualism.
American has always been a part of it, because you'll find a lot of American root work and conjure formulas called, you know, Lucky Indian or Indian Chief and things of the like this, because it's about, you know, remember, and that's also the thing, the interconnection between the Native American, First Nations, and the African is very similar to how it was in the Caribbean and South America, where they did form communities together, especially in Florida. There's a whole legacy of the Black Seminole Indians, who are an intermix of escaped slaves that intermingled with the Seminole Nation, and they had a war with the American Army for like 20 years, you know, fighting in those swamps for they wanted to have their own society. So there's that in there somehow. And also, with most people that were brought over to the Americas as enslaved prisoners, if they could escape and you got far enough away, well, you were going to run into Native Americans. And the first thing you need to know is, what plants can you eat? What plants are for medicine? And what animals? You know, if you're an animist, you need to know what animals you can use, what animal spirits are about, what the plants are for. You know, the ethnobotany and totemic energy it's a part of the legacy within African American root work and conjure, is the Native American, you know, herbalism and animal magic.
No, for sure.
So that's what
I was going to ask you too. Go ahead, Jean Jerome.
No, go ahead, Teresa. Great. And then I'll just interject with a couple of comments and background as well. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, with regards to your actual personal practice, obviously you practice conjure. Now, do you reconcile that with your brand of witchcraft, or your tradition or your lineage of your witchcraft? Or do you blend them, or do you keep them separate? Like, how do you reconcile between the two?
Yeah, I don't really do any kind of blending at all. So my traditional witchcraft training, it's invaluable to me. It's so crucial that I spent those 10 years to get my third degree, because which is very hard to get from other traditions, was every new moon, every full moon, and a class somewhere in between, I learned. And that's what traditional craft is supposed to be about, teaching you to be the conduit, to be the magic, the worker yourself, and not to rely upon deity. So that was good, because it helped hone skills for me. So I still sometimes, you know, certain cycles of the moons, you know, I harken back to that. There's parts of that I'll do, you know, in my own way. But when I practice conjure, see, again, that's a funny thing, is I don't really claim to practice conjure or hoodoo. I next to never use the word hoodoo. But, you know, I'm a member of the New Orleans Voodoo Spiritual Temple, but a lot of things that happens in that temple through Miriam doesn't really resemble to some people what they think voodoo is. Like, there's it is what it is. It's very different. So for me, my personal practice is first and foremost, you know, the house is dedicated to the voodoo, it's called the Niagara Voodoo Shrine. It's dedicated to the spirits of the Underground Railroad, with Harriet Mama Moses Tubman being the beacon and the inspiration and the guiding light for it.
Perfect.
But you know, my personal work is really, so I teach that, I share it at workings. I'll get together with people that are often Awo or Babalaos or Larishas from other traditions, or their Mambos that, you know, also, you know, visit spiritual festivals that people come together. And so that's the thing, is with this, working with the spirits of the Underground Railroad is somewhere we can all meet in the middle without really violating any of our regimen. You know, we're all gifted now, clergy, mediums, we're all all of these, you know, titles, but now we can do something that this is just all I usually try to do, is unite us into something that's uniquely American, North American, for the purpose of elevating and illuminating the one time in this continent, which, you know, white, black, rich, poor, and everybody got together to fight slavery, and they didn't do it always very peacefully. To try to elevate and that legacy. That's my mission. But on my personal practice, you know, as a witch doctor, it's mostly divination for people and helping them get rid of conditions that they think may be affecting them. And so in that regard, since I've only been shown, you know, I'm not going to tell you that I have an entire, you know, practice from the people that gave me my title, There's absolute prayers and fetishes and fabrics and things that I do incorporate, but I usually do that by myself here in the house before someone comes by. And then when someone comes here, whatever has to be done. If they need something washed upon them, then I'll combine what that's what a witch doctor is. We have our own lineage, and then we draw from what we know, and then we decide at that moment what we think is the best thing to rid something of somebody. So therefore, the more you know when you're a witch doctor, which is essentially somebody who's getting rid of bad juju, getting rid of witchcraft, then the more you know, the more you can draw from based on the condition of the person. And again, I work with people from all sorts of ethnicities. So sometimes it's white people, people that fall under the paradigm of a witch or a pagan or just a pagan. And then there's other times there's people that are Catholic or they're members or they're from other parts of the world, that they're either Asian or they're from anywhere in Africa or the Caribbean. So that's why it helps to have a nice rounded background, so that if those people need help, then I kind of have an idea of something they'll be familiar with. And then as long as I know that I'm doing it correctly and it's effective, then it's going to work.
Perfect. So then now that leads me to, with regards to your background and the title of witch doctor, how did that come to be? If you don't mind sharing that, if it's too personal, I mean, by all means,
don't. Not at all. So I know we had this conversation the other night, so you guys have a good a little bit of the background of it. But so it is from a family of people that come from the region of Mozambique, where Mozambique borders Zimbabwe and South Africa. There's a area in there where all the borders kind of meet. And so how that came to me as a title was because the people of the family that were going to be essentially walking away from that lifestyle to convert to Christianity. They had an interesting life. They were very well known. They're very famous people, actually, in some circles. And they knew I was a voodoo guy and a drummer, and that's how I met them, was drumming, and then my ability to help fundraise and things like that for them. So, eventually it was like, hey, I'm going to pass this on to you. And they had a family, so there's a family. So the way this particular lineage of witch doctors operate is you share your blood. I don't mind sharing that much. You take the blood of your family so that you have the blood within you, so that when you make your calls and invocations, they will arrive to you, as opposed to, because the family of the people that are in this sort of like a family of mine is people from Mozambique, people from Kenya, people from Uganda and Nigeria, and then there's me, the guy from Scotland. But the funny thing is in Scotland, though, the funny thing is in Northern Europe and parts of Europe, the term witch doctor was applied by Christians in a way to be like, that guy up there is a witch doctor. And so while it had some sort of a negative connotation back in the day, it's now embraced. And I know that Jean-Jérôme will know this too. Like when you translate the words some places, it's called witch doctor. And I know some people think it's a silly term. So for me, when it was given to me, I liked it a lot and I thought it was neat.
Own it.
And I was like, yeah. But way back then, it kind of almost elicited sort of more humorous response. Whereas now it's, there's so many more pagans, internet era, just blossomed. They think the term means something negative, like a warlock, and even warlock's not a negative term. So there's just a lot of misguided, uneducated people that have read a lot of internet information and don't realize that the term witch doctor has a purpose. And so that is...
And the lineage. And they're Hollywood junkies, right? Because one of the things we've been trying with the Consejo Cultural Yoruba Canada and with the Crone's Corner with Teresa and now with Ancestral Eyes is to break some stigmas.
Yes.
And basically a mind share that's been created by people with a very, quite often a very narrow Judeo-Christian worldview, and that basically helped amplify or portray the negative stereotypes, the negative imagery, and so forth of the indigenous belief systems of the various countries, even in the very United States, as we mentioned, the First Nations. I think it's very important at this juncture to remind people as well that there's a long-standing history. And what I find fascinating about your work, Utu, and I commend you on it, definitely salute you. For those joining us, I mean, Utu has been in the community doing the work for more than 2 decades. Okay, and whether it be just drumming, whether it be upholding and making sure that the memory of Mama Moses, Harriet Tubman, is remembered in the way it should be remembered for her valiant effort and success in bringing people across the Underground Railroad from slaves from the U.S. into Canada, into freedom, which is a sad but yet hopeful history that is shared between Canada and the United States for those tuning in. I think it's very, very important, to salute you for that work, but also remind people that this history and what you touched on, very important, is the use of root work, the use of, the various indigenous belief systems that were brought over with the slaves and represented their bastion for survival, and to be able to survive and to fight back in a sense, and to strive for freedom. If we look in from 1791 to 1804, there was the Haitian Revolution, where the actual voodoo priest, the Honunga and the Honun, used their spiritual tools, their spiritual their ancestors and the different spirits and knowledge that they brought with them to fight that war, to the point that when
the revolution,
when Haiti wins its freedom in 1804, all the surrounding nations, whether it be Cuba and the States and in Brazil and all that, they crack down on the belief systems of the African slaves, because they acknowledged, and there was a reputation had been established that it was the quote unquote fierce blacks with their witchcraft, with their voodoo, which had basically insurmountable against trained troops, well trained, well equipped troops, had been able to successfully win the independence of that nation, which created a crackdown in many of the other nations and which led indirectly, which even further led to the syncretic religion of Santeria in Cuba, based on the Yoruba belief system of Ifa and Orisha, because in order to keep their religion alive and their belief system alive, they had to hide it behind the Catholic images.
Yes.
So it's very interesting for those of us that those that are listening to this that maybe of Cuban descent, of Brazilian descent, Haitian descent, to know that there is a rich and but oftentimes hidden and occult history of that same adherence to the spiritual belief systems that the slaves brought over to fight for their freedom and to win the freedom for their fellow man and woman. So I think is a very, very important. And when you say root work, for those that are Spanish speaking, root work, when we describe your practice in Cuba, again, we had different waves of slaves that were brought over from different regions of Africa. We had slaves that came from Angola, from Republic of Congo, from Mozambique, from Tanzania, indirectly from Zanzibar, from Benin, right, representing the kingdoms of Congo, the kingdom of Dahomey, the kingdoms of Oyo, etc. All of this, as you very aptly said, were basically thrown together in cabildos in Cuba, very similar to what you described in the States, and were out of survival, and not speaking the same language, or having commonalities in their belief systems and in their fetishes and in their spiritual practice, but vast differences in language, history, ancestrality, etc. They forged new paths and new expressions of those belief systems, which they used literally for survival. So it's very important, I think, that I'm hoping that everybody watching the show can gain a new perspective and a greater, deeper respect that a lot of the belief systems, in terms of that juju, that hexing, or some of the aspects of Ebo or other tools, or understanding plants for survival, plants for vitality, the spirituality behind it was for survival, facing a horrible, almost what they would describe as a holocaust of slavery. And the slave trade, which lasted for several centuries.
Yes.
So I'm very fascinated. I'm glad that you touched on those very important items and topics, because I think more Americans, especially more Canadians, need to know that history to change some of those perceptions they have, negative perceptions they have. And where, because of Hollywood and because of many cases a form of brainwashing and ignorance in some of the releases, and that witchcraft or root work or any of these terms are symbolic with some sort of malefic influence, when in reality they represented the bastion, or the tool and the salvation of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people over centuries, right?
Yeah, indeed, absolutely true. The other thing too is what kind of changed things in America is, once it became illegal and much harder to import so many slaves and prisoners into America, that's when they began their breeding program, for lack of a better term, right? And that is like the level of cruelty in America specifically it was next level. And so that's another reason why some of the things were lost, because you're not, eventually you having 2-3 generations born of people that were not now attached to their African roots. It's really harder to have somebody within the community now that's got, so it was always a struggle. It's always a struggle. And in many ways, again, just back to the book, the purpose of it, there are so many white people and people of various other ethnicities writing books about conjure and root work. And just to me, it seemed that it's too late. The whole neo-spiritual pagan blending world, there's thousands of people where, for whatever reason, now deciding they want to get themselves immersed into root work, hoodoo and voodoo, for whatever reasons, whatever their motivations are, is not popular. Up to me. But what I realized was I wanted something for them to have a chance to read that was specifically about the American and Canadian struggle and the cooperation that it took. So therefore, if somebody read my book and they're like, oh, okay, well, I was hoping to get a whole manual on voodoo, but at least now if they were to go now and seek out initiation from somebody, they at least have an idea and are educated. Because what I just don't like, for example, one of the false narratives in American appropriated hoodoo is that hoodoo is one part African, one part native, and one part European, and that someday, some point, a black man and a native and a European sat at a table and decided, let's create this religion. And there we go. It's got parts this, parts that. And they just now, there's people that just say, well, it's part Scottish or it's part Irish or it's part this, so I can do it too. And it just is so insulting and goes over so much of the whole history of how this was preserved. And then now things that are sacred, so sacred, like the High John root, and what it meant, is just now relegated to good luck for gambling, good luck for sex, whereas he was meant to be carried to help you get to freedom, to give you strength and to give you vigor. So for me, it was like, let's just put something out there that, while it was a very pro-black book in many ways, because the people that helped me were all black Canadians and Americans, a pro-black book, but it was also meant for the average white person that might, because I knew. So the thing with Weiser is Weiser put this in every chapters and every Barnes and Nobles in America for a while. Like the book is out there. So I know that there's going to be people reading it. I just did a reading for a woman in Mississippi on the video yesterday. She's like, yeah, I found out because I was in a bookstore and saw your book. And, I was like, oh, Mississippi, huh? But so the idea is for people of all ethnicities to just, whether you're meant to see that there's something to be said about the elevation and exaltation of Mama Moses, or you're a white person that just thinks hoodoo is some kind of combination that happened, appropriated, just jump over the whole idea of all of the struggle that it really represents. And so for me, it was just like, I just wanted to put some truth and some light on some parts of history that nobody else had done, and certainly wasn't being done in conjure or root work or voodoo books, because they're more, again, they're predominantly academic, which those are amazing, or they're hands-on books that are, again, they're just focusing on most of the time.
Yeah, they're hands-on
spell
books.
Work,
manuals,
hex work. It's always spells and hexes and curses. And, to me, that in a way is also very insulting to the beneficial beauty that not only is it rooted in struggle, of course it is, but there's also a beauty in the art, the expression of the type of magic and ritual that's there. I think that's important to
Exactly.
elevate.
And thank you for saying that, because that is so true. So many times, you come across these books and that's basically all it is, and there's none of this. I think you too, Denise, that I know of, were very, very much pro the history and learning the struggle of the people that brought this information. Okay. Because a lot of this information, again, the root work and everything, just the word root work. Okay. They worked with roots. This was medicine. Okay. And it was also a way of being able to administer this to other people for their health. But it was also something that I looked at it as something they would connect with their ancestors. Because I know, even for myself, there's certain things that my mother had told me, okay, many years ago on, simple things to do, like I remember once a friend of mine got sick and we were somewhere, where we didn't have any access to, a drugstore or anything like that, or even a store to be opened. And I remembered some of the simple things that my mother had told me. She said, if you have an upset stomach, go boil some water and drink that hot water. Okay. Drink it as fast as you can. I know it's going to be hot, but she says, it'll clear you out. And she goes, and you'll feel better in the morning. I heard my mother's voice, and she wasn't even dead at the time. Okay. I heard that, and I told my friend, and I said, hey, you know what? We've got a kettle here. And I said, we've got water. I go, boil it, drink it. I go, as much as you possibly can while it's hot. And, he didn't want to do it, but I forced him. I was a good little Polish mama, right? I told him what to do, right? He drank it, and honest to God, I mean, the rest of the night, he was in the room, he was being sick, okay, and whatever, but it worked. He woke up in the morning and he was good. So what I meant to say by all of that was, it's also a connection with their ancestors and their ancestral medicine, what they were brought over from the old country, so to speak, right? This is what they brought with them. And, they didn't have their religious beliefs, so they had their ancestors, and they mixed their ancestral medicines with the root work. Okay. And that's really what it was all about. That's how I looked at it. Right. So, I know there was a question, Jean-Jerome, Jean-Jerome, did you want to ask something about the divination part? We're going to go right into this.
There are so many parts here we could talk about.
I know.
One thing in our conversation when we were speaking earlier this week, Utu, privately, for those that are watching the show, and again, to get a little bit more familiarity with your own style of practice and so forth, before engaging on any root work or any form of conjure and so forth, what is the first step? Like if somebody, for instance, if somebody comes to your particular practice and says, Utu, I need help. How do you approach? What is your own approach in terms of addressing that need for help or that request for assistance?
It's you know the answer. It always starts with divination. And so if somebody comes to my house, which I miss people coming to the house for work. I've been held up here alone for a couple months almost now. But yeah, someone comes here, or if I do it over video reads, it always starts out with, okay, somebody reaches out. I say, well, you want to give me a little more idea what's the issue? And then I say, well, we're going to have to talk, or they come here and then they tell the story, tell me what it's about. The idea, that's exactly sort of the idea I was saying earlier. If I know someone's coming over, I'll say the prayers, the invocations, the songs I need to do. My house, usually in the morning, I know people are coming through it. Will be protected. It's lit up. It's nice. Like a machinery, right? I mean, I'm a public worker. I have a lot of people that don't like me. I have a lot of people that love me, maybe a little too much. So my house has to be a place of protection, as well as spirits' ability to come in and out. And so people come in, they sit down, they tell me their story, what it is, and then we do divination and see. Sometimes what they think is the problem, as you know, it's not the case at all. So, but if it does prove out to be the case that they're now, once they're telling me a little bit and their spirit is now being able to be, sort of like calmed by the ruling spirits in this home to sort of get the truth out, then we find out. And if it does turn out to be the case, they need work, then it's usually provided in the divination, the mechanism. And if it's not, then I just, by sheer amount of practices over the years, will be like, I know what will work for this. And if I can't do something ultimately, which, you know, occasionally happens, then I try to find someone I can send them to that will. You know,
nice.
but you know, that's just the right thing to do. But most times I like to think that I can help them out a little bit. Or at times, you know, unfortunately, people like us will encourage folks that don't want to listen. You know, you tell them that this is not the case. This is not what's happening. You're going to be okay. And they just, nope, they'll just run off to the next other person they can get. And so for me, it always begins with divination to see if it's really the case. And that's how we keep ourselves honest with it and see if they're true.
Exactly.
That's a key point, right? I mean, quite often when you're really doing the work, when you're doing the divination, you're trying to see, whether it be through Ifa, through Pele, Kim, whether it be through Chamalongo, whether it be through spirit, whether it be through Dilogun, shells, whatever method the person uses, if spirit is present in all of those, the ancestor is present in all of those, and quite often when they're confronted with the truth, you know, they don't usually like it very much, right? That's when, you know, there's an Oduvifa Obari Rete that says, when a lie is confronted with the truth, it bows its head, it lowers its head, right? And some people don't like the truth. You know, the truth hurts.
Ashe.
Right.
No, for sure. No, for sure. So, Jean Jerome, did you have any other questions with regards to what were we talking about before the spiritual?
I think one of the things I wanted to highlight as well is, and you touched on it, Teresa, early on in the program, is again, from what you've told us, Utu, you've been exposed to many different traditions, somewhat with some common element being spirit. In the case of, you know, your exposure to the lineage from Mozambique, right? Earning that title Withdoctor, which touched upon another very sad but key point, that again, we hear it from Nigeria, from the Yoruba land, we hear it from Benin, we hear it from Ghana, we hear it from Togo, we hear it from Congo, and quite often, again, people, because of economic hardship, because of social ostracizing and so forth, they feel almost a compulsion to, and they're shunned if they don't give up their traditional belief systems and
join the current,
and join the one Christian vent or one Islamic vent or what have you. Both those religions and their different denominations and lineages have done an aggressive campaign for centuries in terms of trying to crush and to suppress and to enslave. It's almost a spiritual slavery.
Yes.
By imposing their belief system, and to the point of almost brainwashing people into giving up their belief system because they're considered to be evil, they're considered to be ignorant, they're considered to be backwards. All of these are the term. They're condemned to poverty if they stay with their belief system. And it's sad. I mean, you see evidence of that back in times of researchers like William Bascom, Bernard Montal, interviewing and seeing the erosion of the belief system and the constant pressure from the Abrahamic religions, especially Islam and Christianity in Africa. So one thing I found also very interesting is, as you said, with all these different, your ability to give proper respect and space for each of the tradition, each of your lineages. You mentioned you don't, it's not like you slap everything together, but that you through divination you basically call upon the ancestral lineage that is best suited and for dealing with that person's issue or problem, and where necessary, where spirit tells you, you call upon other people in the community and other to assist, which I found is very, very important and something which people, because of ego, because of racism, ego, money, people are afraid to say, I don't know, or I'm not the one that should be helping you. I can see your problem
Yes.
and all that, but this problem is best handled by this other person, right? And that's unfortunately something which is quite often lost because of, the rat race in terms of, people trying to display the spiritual aspect with the material gain and
Exactly.
the cult to the ego, the narcissism. I can do everything. I'm the end of the so.
Yeah.
No,
sure. It's so true. What you were just saying, so just to elaborate a little bit, exactly about the family that I knew that were converting to Lutheranism. They weren't doing it because they were forced to, but they literally sacrificed themselves in a way. It was a very fascinating thing to observe. It was sad, but I also felt, very inspired by them, because they cared about their people so much. They wanted to move back, and the only way that they could be effective to help their people back at home was to get the money that the Lutheran Church would give them. And the only way you can be that is if you're a minister and if your wife is an upstanding member of that. And so they said, there's enough people in our land that still know the traditional ways. We have left our instructions and our ways with our family, the people I mentioned earlier. And they weren't like being forced, but they were being forced, but they were aware of it and conscious of it, which spawned an awful lot of, incredible conversations about, self-sacrifice for your people. I was very inspired by it. And yeah, it was very sad to watch, but I also felt like I was very, again, privileged and lucky to just to how I ended up there. It's like everything for me to be in these traditions. It's just a.
And it's interesting because going along with that train of thought with regards to
domino effect of happenstance that was.
Yes. Sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty now. Oh no!
Oh, just Utu's feed is
okay. Well, I was just going to say, with that train of thought.
Yes.
Whoops.
That's okay. He'll come
with that train of thought. Okay, with that train of thought, with regards to the traditional belief systems in Africa, and then them coming over here, and the diaspora now, the diasporic systems coming into play, and how they started to influence and trying to retain as well the traditional rituals, the traditional beliefs, and that type of thing, right? Oh, too bad we just lost Utu.
I'm sure.
Maybe he'll come back.
He may rejoin. Yeah, I think he just had a problem with his internet, possibly there. So
okay.
Yep. Keep going.
Okay.
I'm waiting for you to sign back on.
Okay. Sorry, I just got a message from somebody. I guess they don't know that I'm doing a podcast live. Anyway,
and he's back.
Here we go.
There we
are. And
he's
back. I love technical difficulties. It happens, right?
A lot. This is the fact of the throttling of the system with everything happening right now. So yeah, I'm not very close to my router right now, so I can be in a better room.
Yeah. No, and I think everybody, given the fact that everybody's on the internet and everything's being overloaded for sure. I was just saying to Jean Jerome, in regards to that train of thought that you were talking about, the families in Africa having to give up their religion more or less for economic reasons, etc. But now those belief systems coming here to the New World and the diaspora, picking up on all of this, right? And again, this kind of leads to the credence of, here we are, we're white people, and what are we doing in an African traditional religion, And again, it speaks a lot to me of how spirit works. Spirit doesn't look upon you as a color, okay? It really doesn't. I mean, if they're there, they are there, and they will work with you, okay? Because I know myself, when I work with spirits, they come from different cultures, they come from different religions, and it was eye-opening for myself, I know. And having conversations with Jean Jerome about that, so, it kind of made me feel good because I thought, okay, good. I'm not losing my mind.
Right.
These spirits, they're from every different walk of life and from different cultures. So, Jean Jerome, did you want to elaborate anything more about that in regards to the diaspora?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's very important for people to understand that, the color of the skin, the ethnicity, can only represent or give you an inclination to a possible lineage by blood. But a person's spiritual makeup and the spirits that accompany a person can come from many different lands, right?
Yes.
And anybody who has been in a consultation quite often will see that, the spirits that accompany a person, which are on a mission to help that person at different stages of their life or with their life mission, which is the case of the guiding spirit or the main ancestor who is responsible, who accompanies Ori, who accompanies the Orisha Labatori to earth, whose mission is to help that person complete. That's why the motto of our show is this life is the journey that our ancestors began, because there's always one main ancestor, one chief ancestor whose responsibility, together with our guardian angel, together with your Odi, your soul, to accomplish a mission, a divine mission that was begun by an ancestor who lived on earth centuries or millennia ago. Quite often what people will not realize is that I can be white, but my guiding spirit can be black from any country, can be Chinese, can be Japanese, can be, and you'll see
Native Indian.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll see quite often a very rich fabric of spirituality, because maybe on earth, over the course of many reincarnations, or what in Yoruba we call atunwa, a person acquires more and more and encounters more iterations of family and friends and people that form part of their spiritual egg bait, right? And that spiritual egg bait, follows you throughout, the various incarnations, the various lifetimes. So for people that, just, superficially see the color of the skin as an expression of, oh, that person should believe this or that person should believe that, it's a fallacy, and they're selling themselves short, and they're selling spirit short. Spirit doesn't believe in color, creed, sexual orientation, or anything. Spirit is spirit.
Yeah, no, I know. Of course, it's all true what you said. But it's sometimes an awkward place. I think we're lucky. Now we live in Canada. It's a very multicultural society.
Canada.
We have some of our people in common who have been our mentors. The African concept is very different than the American concept of what you just said. And so, even when you go down to the Caribbean, depending on where you are, they're very open. They want to share their religion with people, despite what some Americans will tell you. So it seems to be in America mostly where there's this gatekeeping on behalf of some people of color, and that's all good. I don't ever challenge it. But oddly enough, it is predominantly from white people in America that seem to think that certain people shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But I understand why some people of color do not want, but it's hard when the rulers of these religions, to some degree, or the Awo and the diviners say that it is acceptable. It's okay as long as you're not doing anything to insult it or perpetrate to be something that you're not, it's fine. But still, you're gonna incur. We're gonna, as white people, we're going to incur this. I've been very lucky. I've been very lucky that I didn't until a year and a half ago, and it was kind of surprising. But it is what it is. It's okay to me. I have enough people, that I know who I am and where I know what I've been doing. But I understand that the challenge for some people to see it. But I also think that it's that's why I really love the Yoruba outlook of they want the Orishas to be glorified by people of all colors around the world. And why shouldn't they? That's their philosophy. Why should they not be accepted by the globe? Of course, you don't want to run around and pretend to be, I'm not that guy. I don't put on the African clothing and run around and teach this. I teach very little. I provide service when it's asked of me. I share very little of the New Orleans Voodoo Spiritual Temple because, again, as a drummer and a servant to it, that's what I can teach is the order of service, and it's very inclusive and people can learn the drum calls. And other than that, that's why the Underground Railroad for me was the thing that I would not be insulting anybody. I would not be causing any waves. I wouldn't be stepping on anybody's toes coming in. So I just said, let's just, and it's because it's where I lived, and it just happened to be an organic lightning in a bottle, as they say. What are you going to do?
Land spirits, right? You got to go with the land spirits, right? Spirits of the land. This is where they are buried and everything. So, anyway, do you have any more questions, Jean Jerome?
No, I think we've had a very good discussion. We're actually just on top of the hour, an hour and 10 minutes. Utu, I mean, we've been asking the questions. Are there questions or things that from our discussions or even our private discussions that you're curious about or that you'd like to touch on, and or any particular shout out you'd like to do to either friends or fellow practitioners or
upcoming events,
workshops and stuff?
Yeah. So a little bit of what's going on with me in the next few months. If everything goes according to plan, next Saturday, I'm going to be working with a couple of friends to host a Zoom open celebration for the New Orleans Voodoo Spiritual Temple. It's celebrating 30 years this coming weekend. So Priestess Miriam and her then husband, Aswan Chamani, who's now an ancestor, when they started the New Orleans Voodoo Spiritual Temple, moving down from Chicago into New Orleans 30 years ago, this is 30 years. And so unfortunately, the celebration that many of us we're going to be traveling down from literally all over the world. Miriam has children all over the world. And unfortunately, because of the current situation with this pandemic, it was postponed. So it's going to be postponed till next year. But we're going to try to do one virtually, just so people can pop in and say hello. And I want her to have that moment somehow to still pop in on the internet and say hello, everybody, because I talked to her just the other night. This is a woman that I've been supporting and being inspired by for 20 years for a reason. She survived Hurricane Katrina, and I went down there to help take care of the clean the house, and help take care of everything. She survived a fire that burnt down the temple. And then she had to move, and now she will survive this. And she is in great spirits and a good mood. So next Saturday, people that come to my page, I'm hopefully going to have a little thing about that to celebrate, just a little way for about an hour or so to let everyone see her smiling face and her upbeat approach to life, even in the face of adversity. Is one of the reasons why she inspires me so much. And then the following night, on the 10th of May, the evening of Mother's Day, I have an online virtual class. It's being hosted by Hex Education, and it's on, of all things, working with animal spirits and animal magic.
That one sounds exciting. I like that.
So that is obviously, I think, I know Jean Jerome has, we discovered the other night when we're talking that we have some similarities in some other traditions. And so for me, I've always loved the animal magic, whether you're wearing it or you're bringing the spirit into you, or you can communicate with it or get it to work for you. The animals, to communicate with animals in this way, to me is part of a very lost magic. And so one of the things I do teach around the continent when the band travels or I travel at festivals. So this time it's virtual. There's going to be a lot of links for it on my page. And that's what really it's coming up for me is next weekend, a couple of things like that. And then the Dragon Ritual Drummers, we're not really going anywhere this summer. We're just going to probably play a couple of virtual shows for a couple of events that we really care about. And we said, yeah, we'll do that. We'll be on the live feed. So I'm just going to try to keep holding out here in the house and stay out of trouble, stay away from people, wear my mask, be distant, but try to stay communicating, on virtual lines like this. So,
I know, I love it. You know what? I want to take that course, the workshop with the animals. I'm excited about it. I was like, yes.
Yeah, it's a fun one. I enjoy doing it. I've done it a few times, and so this one, I think it's going to be good. It's going to be really neat.
Not to give away too much, and again, in the interest of it, because we're coming close to the end of the show, but maybe just touch upon a little bit upon animal magic. In other words, what is in your practice, in your experience, in your lineages, how are animals and animal spirits used invoke without going too deep, but just like an overview, like what is the importance or the symbology, and also the practical use of typically these spirits, and are we we talking about spirits of this land or animal spirits of different lands, right?
So I could probably do a weekend about it because it's such a vast subject. It encompasses so much.
Yes,
so
it is.
What I try to focus on though is within about it's a 2.5 hour classic thing. So at least a half an hour, some idea of breaking down the different parts of the world, how they approached animal magic. Now, to me, what I emphasize mostly on, and as a member of the African traditional religions, everywhere I teach this class, I very early on say, okay, look, I know a lot of you are wondering if we do animal sacrifice, and I explain how that is done, why it's done, when it's done, who does it, just to get that out of the way, because I know people are thinking, I want to, how's this work? So I just get that out of the way right away. And then I like to talk about the whole part of the world, the various parts of the world, how they approach it. So to me, the emphasis for me is working with animals that are alive. So animals that are living in your home, living out in your back neighborhood, migrating, or you can travel to.
Squirrels.
These are animals that we can work with. Squirrels, I know people have trouble with them all the time. There's ways you can get in their sphere as a worker to get them to work for you. Same as insects, in the home. People hate, centipedes. Centipedes are smart. Centipedes, by the time you see a centipede that's about, 4 inches or something, that's a 7-year-old insect that's been living in your house for that entire time. They don't go other places. That knows how you breathe. That insect knows, that centipede knows what your mood is like. And if you ever notice, when a centipede shows up, it seems to come walking right up to your feet or wherever you are. They have no fear. So therefore, to me, that's a message, and that's an ability for that insect that lives in your house, that knows the energy of your home, to me, is trying to tell you something. And it's usually about protection. So, and then, there is the romantic aspect as well of, can the eagle be my totem animal or spirit animal, or all the other terminology that's usually insulting to most traditions. But the truth of the matter is, yes, you can. If you can see it, you can. Or also with animal magic, what I like to emphasize is using animal parts. Now, I don't go, I respect hunting. If a hunter can ever give me food, I'm so happy. I don't hunt, but I also try to use animal parts from good sourcing. If I find a roadkill or feathers at the beach, it's a lifestyle to go out and collect things. And then those, any of us that are involved in the type of magic we know that feather, that claw, that tooth has mana. It has ashe in it. You can pull it out and use it for your betterment. And so I try to just sort of hold it down into that idea of, here's the various ways people approach animal magic around the world. Here's kind of how we do it here. And in my, so this is not really something I've been taught specifically by any one particular way, but it's something that I definitely had a passion for most of my adult life. And as I was going along and working the way I do, it's just always something. Anyone who hangs around with me or lives with me always knows there's going to be some kind of crazy animal situation. That's always the case. I can get really close to the wild ones. I end up trying to rescue them a lot and things like this. So animals are a big part of me. I think they talk to us in a way that humans don't pay attention to as much. And even the person's house pet, even their house cat, their dog, they may be a witch and they might be a worker, but there's still a way to enhance the relationship magically with your companion. And so I actually tell people how to do a ritual in there to make that happen. So
nice.
I'm definitely a rogue. I'm a rogue in many ways.
no, that's good. That's good. No, and also to amplify for those that are listening, everybody or most people within Ifa know, especially as Utu has said, the importance of certain animals in our ritual practice. Also, in one of the most powerful forces, the Iyami, represented who manifests as snakes, birds, spiders, and the magic. So sometimes you have a spider, sometimes you have a bird. It might just be a simple bird, but those animals are, as Utu said, watching, and they are conduits. They are intermediaries between the world of the spirit and the world of humans, this dimension, right? So
And I was just going to ask you, I was going to ask you, Utu. So, what do you say when someone gets bit by a spider, a black widow spider, and ends up in the hospital and has a near-death experience? Would you consider that a totem animal?
Well, it's funny you should ask that. Sometimes, okay, so I have worked with a few people that would be defined as, medicine workers, shaman, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And they have always told me that sometimes, even if it's an unfortunate way, when certain animals do bite you, and if you survive, it was meant to be a type of a passage rite, that now the venom and that magic is within you. Now, I know this, I can say this because, like I said earlier, we traveled and lived in Colombia when I was younger. I almost died so many times on that length of my life. And one of the worst ways was out in the water one evening by myself. I got tangled up by a Portuguese man-o-war, one of the most deadliest sea creatures. It was all around me. I spent like a week, and we were in a very remote area. There was no doctors. I almost died through that. I will never forget the hallucinations. I still have marks on my midsection of where it left like a bruising rainbow. It was unbelievable. And the only thing that was recommended to help with that was urine. Pour urine and rub it down on there. Years later, as I became a surfer, someone, eventually they're like, if you get stung by a jellyfish, you pee on it. And I was like, well, actually, I think that might have been the one thing that saved my life from a Portuguese man-o-war. So, for some people, that's also in dreams, right? In dreams, a lot of people, I think they misinterpret. A big snake comes up and bites you, or a wolf bites you. A lot of times, that's the only way they can share their essence, because when you play with your cat or your dog, what do? They try to put their jaw around them, and they like to,
their mouth.
So it's the same in a dream. A primal animal may feel like it's biting you.
Yeah.
And again, I know some people. My sister is allergic to spider bites, so if she got bit by a poisonous one, she would have a problem. So, black widows, tarantula bites, things like that. I just feel like sometimes that if you get it, you think about it and find a way to take that as medicine now within you, and you have venom in your blood that can
Ashe.
That animal.
It happened to me. It happened to me, to a black widow spider of all things here in Canada.
I'm gonna just mention a small little thing, because I don't believe in coincidences.
Okay.
Right? I always say coincidence is when spirit wants to remain anonymous. Okay. Utu, before we conclude for tonight and say our goodbyes to everybody till our next show, and I'll introduce our guest for next week as well. That'll be coming on. What is the origin? What is your known origin of your name, Utu?
Oh, yeah, no problem. Yeah. That is my first priestess in the 90s. Lady Rebecca, when I initiated the tradition of witchcraft, in its inner mysteries had Sumerian magic, Sumerian mysteries.
Ashe.
So,
nice.
Ashe. Now, I'm a Leo, so I'm a summer baby. She knew that, and she just, I think a lot of people, when they tell me, they call me sunshine or I got a ray of light, they're kind of being sarcastic, to be honest. But she was calling me Utu, meaning the sun, not the sun god. The sun god is called Dingirutu, but and then eventually when I had to choose a name within the mysteries of it, I got used to it. I liked it. It resonated with me. And so that's since 1994. So since 94.
I love it.
So
Utu means.
So can I just add a slight variance to that? The name Utu is a Sumerian name, part of the Anunnaki, but Utu, according to many documents, was actually the Sumerian spider goddess.
Okay. Right.
Wow. Okay. I love it.
It took me a long time to reconcile with spiders. I tell people all the time, never kill a spider. One walked across the floor just last night when I was here. I was surprised to see one so big.
Yeah.
In my house, actually. But yeah, spiders, I leave them in my house all the time. They're my friends,
Me too. Ever since I got
bit. I just wanted to know if you did, because I've been one of the things that led to the show. I've been doing now for almost 10 years, a lot of research beyond just Ifa. I was initiated as a priest of Ifa, Babalao. It's going to be 10 years in November. But well before that, I've been in the tradition since the time of my mom, when she researched in Cuba the Afro-descendant religions and languages, and wrote several books with the Academy of Sciences, and some of the books are in the Smithsonian Institute. But beyond the Afro descendant or West African descendant belief system, I've also spent a lot of time doing research far further back in terms of ancestry, together with my friend, which is our guest for next week, and I hope you'll tune in, Utu, Daniel Dafoji, Daniel Barreiros, which is a Bokono who was initiated. He has a very long trajectory. I mean, he was initiated almost every Afro descendant diasporian system or lineage in the thing. But his ancestor, his Joto, his ancestor took him to the place where his Joto had last had an incarnate, which was in Abomey in Benin. And he was blessed by the king of the time to become a Honunga and become a Bokono. Wow. And but he and I have been for because his ancestor comes from that period of is older than just the Benin, but go back to the time of Sumer. We've been with for the last 7 years and doing comparative analysis between a lot of the Orisha, a lot of the belief system within Ifa Orisa, even within Palo, Nkisi, with the divinities that came from the area of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the ethnic group called the Phoenicians, which were those discussions, carrying traders and so forth, as well as many nomadic Arab tribes that believed and work with things or spiritualities as you know, they're called the jinn.
Yes.
So it's an area of interest. So I was up till 3 last night in the morning this morning, and
why? Because you're Batman.
Because I'm Batman, and because I was looking up a few things, doing some comparisons, and I found, and I said, this can't be, to actually have seen that reference of Utu being the Sumerian spider goddess, and very, very important daughter of Enki and Ninkura. I had to ask you, did the origin of that name? Because some people might say, Utu maybe is Afro descendant, or even your background. I believe a birth background is Scottish. You mentioned, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting that, and this is what I'm going to just throw as a little, and we'll talk a little bit about this in our next show next week, how our Joto, our ancestor, our guiding spirits, sometimes are spirits of high elevation that have come back to us, with us down in this journey on Earth, complete a mission that we began centuries or millennia ago. And they may have a different look, ethnicity, height, color, gender, what have you. But this gathering and this show and this thing is not by happenstance or coincidence.
So let me leave you here with I'm going to recite something to you that is in Sumerian. Yeah. So it's actually Assyrian. So in our tradition, we had to learn a great deal about the lexicon, and we had, so here's what I say when I look at the sun every day. Utu Girgal Suramana Siskur Ramni Iutu Dingerutu Dumaku. And that means that essentially that the great sun god is my judge. He's the warrior of his mother. He's the great dagger in the sky. I am a joyful servant, and you are my judge forever. That is essentially what that means. And so every time I look up at the sun, I recite that.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. That's awesome.
And you too, I have even greater respect for you now, because every morning when I get out, I always look at the sun. I say it in Yoruba. I say, Olorun agbeweo. Olorun, support me. Right. Olorun, keep me safe and enlighten me. Right. So,
nice.
Very interesting.
Okay.
No, I love it. Utu, I want to say thank you
so much. It means so much to me that you guys asked me to come on here. I just,
meant more to us.
Pure blessings and exaltation to your lineage and to all of your ancestors as well. And the work you're doing is amazing. I'm very honored to be invited, and I can't wait to watch these shows. This is going to be my new go-to. So I watched the last one before, but now Friday nights I'm often home anyway. I'm going to be home next Friday. What do you know?
That's right.
So,
I
Well,
think
I'm looking forward
much
to that
love.
one next week. No,
Yeah,
and thank you,
Me
Utu.
too.
Thank you once again. It was an honor having you on here. We got to
absolutely.
know you, and I love the book. And you know, one day we will all get together, okay,
Yes.
live and in person.
And everybody,
Yeah, we
check
will.
out Utu's Conjuring of Animal Spirits
Yeah,
with Withdoctor Utu. And if you want to reach Utu, I've just put on the screen his Facebook
Facebook page.
public
Yes.
profile. So please,
Mhm.
again, I've
I'm the only Utu Witch Doctor on Facebook. I'm easy to find.
that's absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. But because you're an original, you're an original. And I've always great respect for him because for those that are tuning in that know myself and Teresa, Utu has been somebody which has really been a bastion of the community. He's
Yes.
never wavered. He's always been consistent. Always had
Exactly.
a devotion and an
Mhm.
interest to
Mhm.
promoting culture, music, spirit, and those ancestors that gave their lives for the
Mhm.
freedoms of others in the
Exactly.
community. So my deepest respect to you, as they say
Exactly.
in Fon Javalu Joto, praises to your ancestor, to your guiding
Thank you.
spirit, and to Mama Moses, Harriet Tubman, the ancestor of the land which you've chosen to venerate and to so eloquently
Ashe,
and
ashe.
faithfully represent on earth in this incarnation. Buru boya
Thank you.
boshike.
Boro boy Boche, my friend. Thank you. You're gonna make me cry because I'm so lonely. Thank you for the kind words.
Okay, everybody, have a good
Right.
night.
Much love.
Odabo,
All right.
blessings.
Bye.
We'll tune in next week, Friday, May 8th at 8 p.m.
Yes.
For our next show with Bokono Daniel Dafoji. He'll be joining us from
Perfect.
Uruguay, where he lives, and should be a very
Oh,
interesting
that's
show.
Uruguay.
Yeah.
We have.
Yeah.
I got family from. It's another story altogether. We got some Uruguayans in my family.
Oh, so
Oh, nice.
that-
All right.
definitely tune in for that one.
I am. I noticed that. I noticed him on the list in Uruguay. I was like, ah.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. All right, everybody.
Perfect.
Have a good night.
Okay. Good
okay,
night,
all the best.
everybody. Thank you for joining us. All right.
Yes.
Bye.